Yeah, so this is the last session. The introductions are complete, so we'll jump straight in. So the topic is really about the newer forces which are coming in and which will predominate in future. Will they help in taking away some of the impediments which are there coming in the way of women being in the workforce, the taper as they go up the hierarchy, as well as women's leadership and on boards. So what I thought is we would approach this in a couple of ways. We would first spend a little bit of time, not more than maybe 2 or 3 minutes, in getting perspectives from this very accomplished group on what is really coming in the way. You've heard a lot through the day, but we'll hear their perspectives on what's really coming in the way for women to actually join the workforce and be there right till the top. Why is there a leaking pipeline, as Zia called it, existing in India and in such a big way? And then we'll come to the second part, which is really technology, the entry of millennials, new ways of doing business, digitization. Are they going to naturally erode some of the impediments which are there? And, you know, or at least create an environment which is conducive to some of these impediments being taken away through interventions, right? So does the environment become at least a little bit more conducive? So we look at it in 2 ways, essentially. And in the first, you know, let's pose the question a little bit differently, which is most Indian companies and probably companies across the world profess a gender-neutral stance, at least in the formal organized sector. And what do I mean by a gender-neutral stance? It means when there is a recruitment happening, the best person should get the job. When you have an appraisal, the best person should get promoted. So I've worked in the financial services sector for about 24 years, heading businesses of banks, and that's exactly the way I ran the businesses. I cannot hand on heart say that I'd ever been overtly discriminated against. But what has that led to? If you look at the statistics that we are probably third lowest, Japan at the lowest, and Argentina then, and then India is the third lowest. And pretty much across the globe, in spite of a professed gender-neutral stance, the numbers of women, when they're 50% of the population, we feel happy if they are 20%, 25% in senior leadership roles. In boards in India today, we are at 11% after the legislation. The numbers before were abysmal, so it has resulted in a big jump, but it's still very low. So what then is required? And that's the question which I'm going to address my panelists with. So if a gender-neutral stance hasn't led to anything, what should companies start to do? Do they advocate a more affirmative action? If not, why not? If so, in what form, right? So I'll start with you, Ariane.
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, first of all, I work for a global organization. I've moved to India about, I started working in South Asia a year ago and moved to Mumbai last July. It has been a great experience. It's very interesting to see that many times we think that we are the only ones to have the problems, but it's not. I think the fact about gender equality, equal opportunities, right, empowerment, that goes across the globe. And I come from Brazil. A lot of the data is very similar to here. Like, for instance, women in boards have very low participation, so on senior management, right? So it's across the globe. And I work for a global organization, and we do have clear goals to end poverty. And to end poverty, you need to empower women, right? It's just a basic fact, you know, how many of us in the whole world, right? So we represent an important force of the economy. And all the countries will benefit for having a greater participation of women in the economy. And we walk the talk. So that means that not only in our projects, our goals for our external clients, that's very clear on the private sector and public sector, we also do internally. So I think here a lot of discussions have been what your organization can do to improve the conditions for women, right, and to actually give the opportunities. Again, we don't walk away of meritocracy. It's, for us, it's critical. It doesn't change. But we do encourage women to be more upfront. So one of the things that we do, if you go to our website, you're going to see that the positions that we post, we encourage women to apply, and we say so. It is said there, right? Of course, it takes two to tango. Women also need to have the courage to apply, right? We encourage, but women need to have the courage, right? We also allow, we have targets, right? I mean, we really seek to increase the participation of women on our careers. So from the entry level to mid-level and to senior management. We are very conscious of that. We nominate board members in our investee companies. And we have targets. We have to increase. We used to have 29% of our nominees women in our boards. Now we increase the target to 35%, for instance, right? We do have objectives to seek, right? So this clarity is really important. Internally, we also promote trainings, right? For instance, last year, up to 31st of December, every single manager in IFC was obliged to take unconscious bias training, right? Because that starts from the recruiting process, from how you deal with your teams, right? Again, and we also promote how we retain talent. I arrived here in the middle of the afternoon, and I heard Zia saying about, when women come back from maternity leave. Yes, for a few years, you need to have some flexibility. But look, in the end, we offer this office. Why do you really need to be at the work at 8 a.m. and leave at 6? Or how flexible can you be? Like, I arrive a bit earlier, leave a bit early, and there's a certain degree of flexibility that we offer not only for men, for women, but for men as well, right? Because we understand that sometimes you need to have this peace of mind, and that actually will increase your productivity, because in the end, we keep an eye on meritocracy, right? Because we believe that results won't change with that.
I would say that we believe that we have been talking of gender equality, and world started speaking much before us, but it is long ago we also started in India. Fact remains, we have been putting a lot of things in place, but what has been observed is that still we are far behind what we want to achieve in this area. And I still believe, though when I speak this, it doesn't hold true for me. It is like a contradicting, my own organization has got a ratio of 65 to 35. We have got 65% women and 35% men. So that kind of a ratios we have. And it is all across the ladder. But fact remains, when we see as a whole, we find that still there are a lot of societal limitations are there. So still women comes with a mind saying that I have got two professions. One is that I have to manage my family, and second is that I have to manage my work. And still women, they believe that they are not the prime breadwinner of the family. So they feel that they are an assistant breadwinner. Fact remains they are earning more than men, but still they are considered as an assistant breadwinner of the family. And there is also a huge gap between an understanding of a men and women in their own families, in the corporate world, all across the society. In a sense that if a responsibility of a child lies on a woman, it equally lies on the men also, or a husband also. If a mother-in-law or a father-in-law of a lady is not well, the equal responsibility lies on the husband. I would say that we have been talking, we have laid down guidelines. There are places where a lot of guidelines have been laid, but they have not been spoken, they have not been propagated, they have not been communicated. And there are still many organizations, those who have not formed those guidelines. I will start from, I would start from Sexual Harassment Act. There are there are policies, but still I don't find any rules, policies and systems in place in the organizations. So I would say that we are long way to go as far as gender equality is concerned. So the time given by by a moderator is only 2 minutes. So rest, solution to this problem, we will look into the second part of our discussion. Am I right? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Devinder. So basically, all of you are aware of the discussions we've had. We all know the challenges we are facing. And what I think could be a suggestion is where we eliminate boundaries. Today, we need to empower our women in the workforce to think that even if they go on maternity leave, they have an equal shot at promotion when they come back. That's the kind of confidence we need to give to them, and that will only come when there is a change in mindset. And mindsets are changing. It's not that they're not changing. Companies are putting in place policies. The government has been really supportive in changing the laws. There is a perspective on that which we will hear shortly. But the environment is changing, and awareness and communication is what I think will bring the change that we are all wanting to see. Because now it's not about so much about awareness, but it is about implementing the change on the ground. And a lot of us who are in this room and many of us sitting here do talk about it at various forums. We do see the change in the people who work with us, even the ones at home. They think differently. They're all coming from villages. They manage money. They have less number of children. So all of that is the awareness that we are bringing about. So I am very, very optimistic about seeing the change. When, I can't say, but clearly there is a lot happening, and the boundaries will be eliminated sooner than later.
So we heard, when the question that I had posed and which our accomplished panel answered was basically, in spite of a gender-neutral stance, why area about cognitive errors in our thinking? Because the human brain is hardwired to have biases and stereotypes, whether we like it or not. So, as when I was introduced, I was mentioned I actually taught a course, which was as recent as 2 months ago at IIM Ahmedabad, on a gender lens on corporate policies, right? And I researched this area, and obviously I'm passionate and a believer in the cause of gender. Yet, when I do an implicit bias test myself, I turn out to be moderately sexist. The reason is that years and years of messaging leads to a subliminal bias which we can't get rid of. The awareness helps, but it helps only to that extent, right? There are, however, cutting-edge research which is available today where you can design interventions. So even you can't debias the human mind, you can debias organizations. And we'll spend part of the time talking about that. But I want to leave you with one more example, which will probably bring this alive, just like the Heidi Rosen and the Howard Rosen example did. And this is a very, very often quoted example, so many of you may be well aware of this. All through the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, orchestras in the US and across the world had only about 5% of the musicians were women. Till the 1970s and 80s, where somebody decided we will blind audition. In other words, you're interested in the quality of the music. You're not interested in the ethnicity or the sex of the musician. You ought not to be, right? So in the selection process, at the preliminary stage, there was a partition. The musician was behind the blind, and the musician played. Guess how much the percentage increase in women who were 5% became just at the preliminary stage because of that blind audition. It increased by a staggering 50%. So that's what implicit or subliminal bias is all about. It's there in every sphere of life. It's there at every process that happens. I will talk about one more example. Very recently on a board that I sit on, the CEO stepped down, and we were recruiting a CEO, and the consultant was given the mandate. It's obviously a P&L, it's a CEO role, and we wanted CVs which fitted the bill. There were 6, 7 CVs which came. All of them were men, okay? one of the investors, and I represent that group of investors, said, you know, can we tell the consultant that we may like to see, we have a preference for a woman. So I said, okay. There's no question of changing the job specs. We don't want anybody who is any lower than any of the men that you have, but send us at least a few CVs. About 7, equal number of CVs came, all of them were women. I looked at them exactly 4 months back. They were no better, no worse if I look at it on an average. But they did not come the first shot. What does it show? That's what subliminal bias is. I just wanted to give you 2 examples from one from the US in a completely different area, music and orchestra, and one from the corporate world, from my own life, which I just experienced 4 months back. Okay? And I also explained to you that all through my life, I've run my business on a gender-neutral stance. The best person should get the job. But what did we ignore? We ignored the fact that all of us, men and women, carry stereotypes and biases. What we see is what we think ought to be. Okay, there's a gentleman called Daniel Kahneman who is a psychologist, but he won the Nobel Prize for economics. Many business schools abroad have made his book mandatory. It's called Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. It ought to be mandatory for corporate executives as well as in Indian business school. It talks about 2 forms of thinking and the fact that we use our gut, and that gut many times is useful, but very often is also something which is, you know, a result of experiences, biases, stereotypes, which results in decisions which are suboptimal. So paradoxically, when the moment you talk of affirmative action, and which was what my question is, it turns out that we think quotas, will it lower the bar? Zia talked about it, but didn't really address it. You know, so men make mistakes, women will also make mistakes. But what we're talking about here is not lowering the bar by taking away stereotypes through interventions, by taking away biases, you level the playing field, you encourage decision-making which is more accurate, which is more correct. Paradoxically, you create is interventions which get rid of them. Anyway, to come to the second part, which is really our topic, what are the things which are happening today, the newer forces? And you know, I can list about 3 or 4, and the panelists will list some others. And what can these forces, these emergent forces do to actually diminish, take away the impediments? Can they do so? Or can they at least, as I mentioned earlier, create a more conducive environment? And the ones that come at top of my mind are technology, the entry of millennials, the enormous amounts of data, which goes by the name of big data, that has become available. And the other is the knowledge economy, which really looks at creativity and innovation more than any other aspects. So if you look at these things, do they take away the impediments which existed, or do they create an environment at least where some of them can be removed? We start in no particular order this time, so maybe, Archana, you might want to go.
I would just say that these interventions actually create a more conducive environment. And I can quote by example that we have in our company a training called MARK, which is Men Advocating Real Change. So making the environment more conducive by including the men in understanding how it is for their colleagues to work who are not of the same gender. And one of the things that came out of that training, which is essentially about making men aware, was a colleague coming up to me and saying, I did not know that you guys spent half a day deciding which flight you're going to take. Because you see the time, where it lands, what is the, you know, the way to the hotel, what are the kind of cab drivers that you'll get. And he says, all I do is just see whether it suits my wallet and it's the right time. I just land up. I don't think. So that is an awareness that, and it's something really simple, that he now became a little more sensitive to the challenges that his female colleagues were facing. And every time he asked somebody to go, it was very consciously, okay, you don't want to go tonight, go tomorrow morning. And there was an understanding, and it's really small, so this kind of an intervention really helps. And there are many such interventions which Adriana would like to talk about.
I think I mentioned earlier here, I just, the fact that you allow technology to help you, right? I mean, nowadays, you can access your email from any place, right? Depending of work, even systems, right? Your internal systems you can access from home depending on the type of cybersecurity that you have, but it allows you a lot of flexibility. So why not use that on the benefit of retaining talented women, right? I mean, retaining women in the sense that you can actually be more flexible, right? Many times, eventually, the person needs to be at home between 4 and 6 p.m. And if there is something really important, the person will engage a bit later and finish it up, you know, put the kid to bed and etc. I mean, particularly, I have done that many times, you know, because it doesn't change your productivity, but does give you flexibility, because that's what you need, right? And you're still going to deliver what you need to deliver. And I think, again, that goes both for men and women, right? Of course, I think for a certain phase, women would benefit the most. And we have to remember that kids grow up, right? So keeping the talented women working with you and, you know, recognize their talent, allow them some flexibility, that will pay off greatly in the future. Because, you know, that stressful phase will pass, right? And people work today till how many years? You know, we're very productive. Our expectancy is just increasing. So we are more and more productive, right? How many people you see work at full speed at 60-year-old, 65, right? So we need to think about that. Because in the end, we lose knowledge, we lose, you know, we invest a lot in hiring people. How much do we invest to hire, to train, right? And then the person leaves at the age of 28, 30. The company also loses because you invest in that person. You invest in that talent. We need to think about that. And technology is there to help. And we need to think about many ways to become more productive, all those things. So another important matter that technology helps and communication helps, it's networks. Women, we are terrible in networking. We're very bad on that. And I think many times networking can also be promoted by technology, internet, but also internally. Companies should think about how to promote a great integration about with women staff. I come from a country that soccer is the greatest passion. So it's very natural for men to after work, to go for a happy hour or watch a soccer match, right? Traditionally, women don't like soccer. So what do? We need to promote environments that would gather women. Maybe not as in the same frequency as a soccer tournament, because of course we also have other priorities, but we should foster that, force this environment, because in the end, when we think about many aspects of your career, networking matters, right? So we need to have that in mind. And also, we need to make an extra effort, but our companies need also to create this environment to promote networking.
Client meeting, you come back to office and you finish at 6:30 there. That was one rule without taking, to be honest, any permission from anybody, because you go through that whole, you know, rung of taking permissions. I threw out of the window and I said, we used to have a morning meeting, you know, it's money management, so you have a morning call on how the markets are going, etc. So I said people can log in from wherever they want. And if anybody is finishing a call which is close to home, you go home, right? Ultimately, what are you sacrificing? You're still holding your person responsible for the results of work. You're not policing their hours of work. You're looking at how productive they are. But the two things I want to point out here. One is this flexibility, right? So you still need to deliver, but you go home if you want to. You log in through a phone into a conference call. You have to log in. You make sure you have that time. And, you know, if you're managing your day's work such that you have a client meeting which is closer to your home and you go home after that, nothing is lost. I had men in the team who came and told me, you're a woman. You're favoring other women. I said, who said? I've not written it down in the rule book. But this applies to you. I don't want you to be in office and log into the morning call, log into the call from home. No problem. You deliver like she delivers. It so happened, and sometimes it's luck, the women were delivering more than the men, and I'm sort of extremely cognizant of the fact that it can change any time, but it helped me to say that, as long as you deliver, I'm happy. So the point I'm trying to make, sometimes overtly women-friendly measures create a backlash, and it's absolutely not worthwhile. Wherever it is possible, the measure should be extended to both. You need a life outside of work, men do it, as well as women. I mean, sure, women bore the brunt of the family and probably need it more because of the cultural context, not just in India, but in many countries. But primarily, leveling the playing field also means giving that same benefit to everybody. That's what equality is all about. It's not about overtly only women-friendly measures. I think that creates a backlash that is regressive in more ways than one. So I am one of the very few people who will not stand up and support the 26-week maternity leave. I actually think it should have been paternity and maternity, which would have encouraged a break of that barrier. But let me come to that later. Let me pass on to Surinder.
So if we look at answers, I would divide it into 4 parts. One is within the corporate world. It starts from top, middle, and at the low end. Then we have to look at society as a whole. I am talking of outer organization. And third is women, where we feel that there is a discrimination or inequality. So when I look at this complete pyramid, Zia mentioned that woman has only privilege to deliver a baby, a bundle of joy. And she can only deliver. And men can't do that. So fact remains, that is a part and parcel of a woman. And if I see the discrimination or inequality, that is the only thing where there is an inequality, because the child grows, the woman becomes more responsible towards child, whereas father should also be responsible, and I believe they are now. But if we look at this as a whole, I believe that the participation has to start from top. I am talking from a CEO perspective, saying that CEO has to participate and involve himself into the entire process of gender equality. In a sense, when there should be champions or a champion in the team. Like what we do normally is that when we hire an employee, I would say, because we don't believe we are gender neutral. So the counseling happens for both, whether it is men or women, and it starts from an outside body, which speaks about a gender neutrality. So they say that you are equally responsible for this job, you are as good as men, and similarly it is given to men also. So first of all, we believe that we should rise above the gender. So now coming over to this, and fact remains, when woman comes in a job, the age of delivering a baby is from 28 years now to 35 years. So that is the age which is the most productive, and our career is on the fast track. So that is the age which needs to be looked after. If that age is looked after properly, I believe that the women, you will find a lot of women in the highest of the management, I can tell you. That is a time when women get shaky and they change their gears and directions. So what I believe is that as a corporate, now today the maternity bill has come, we say that 6 months of leave. I'm sorry, my moderator was little against it. But fact remains, I look at it as an opportunity missing in you from a skills point of view, competence point of view, even from a qualification point of view. So there are a lot of things available which you can do sitting at home. At the same time, I'm sure the woman is equally responsible as men. So when it comes on a performance, I believe, like my colleague said, that there is a lot of networking. That networking can be used from home to do your job also. It doesn't mean that you have to be physically available during those 6 months in pregnancy. Rather, as a corporate, we should start celebrating pregnancy and give women that comfort. When woman comes back, she is more skilled, more confident, she is more loyal to the organization, and probably she's out of the stress of looking at too many things at a time. She's more focused on what your organization requires. So that is how you can improve the performance of your organization. But this has to be propagated, communicated, and first it has to be understood by the corporates. So it comes at a cost, but it gives you a lot of benefits and it nullifies your cost, I can tell you. Then second part is whether it is men or women, they are equally responsible for their old age parents. I think we are different from other countries as far as looking after our parents are concerned. So if I look at my organization, I believe that I should take advantage of the changing system. You know, the system is changing in a sense that complete environment is changing around. So there are home care companies available, those who give service to, those who reach medical service to the home. As a corporate, it's my responsibility to see that I tie up with the corporate company because I have got a far better and bigger negotiating power, get cost less and give it to my employee. Probably I'll charge from them, but I'll help them that this service is available, therefore we are there to look after your ailing in-laws or parents. So these type of models are available and we should look into those type of models. Then coming over to creche, now it has become mandatory, but fact remains, even corporates can create an environment of a daycare. Many corporates put together can create a daycare which can give employment to, again, a woman which is not there. So they can also get into a mode with the volume, they can reduce a financial load on a woman saying that we have got a daycare center or a creche here, which will give you a best service because we believe that we can look at from a larger angle and we can monitor and control the quality. If we can give that comfort to the women, I can tell you they can be honestly better than the men as far as decision making is concerned. So we have to address at different levels as far as gender equality is concerned.
Right. So, as our moderator said, that interventions are required, and the government is, of course, supporting us with all the new laws. And yes, I again support the 26 weeks because it is something that has been long required, and I believe that, you know, medically and physically as well, women do need that time off and the comfort of knowing that they have their jobs and that the company is going to take care of their interests. So that, to my mind, is important. One of the things that we are actually looking to address here is reinventing the workplace and how will the new workplace be. So the support of the government, legislation, is one of the ways to start. And the example we were discussing some time back is that India is the only country in the world where CSR has been mandated for corporates. We have many billionaires, but unfortunately philanthropy doesn't come naturally to us. So the government has mandated it. And the government has recognized how many women we have in the workforce. And in the last 5 to 6 months, we've had almost 10 legislations which have changed and which are to the benefit of the workforce, including women. So these interventions, I think, are required to make the society a little more comfortable and diverse for the women working in companies, and I'm sure it'll go a long way in improving the diversity quota.
And now the other second part is that how technology is going to help, how infrastructure is going to help, how the changing business environment and model is going to help. I believe that we will have technology in place, digitalization will definitely help women, but from an infrastructure point of view, I can see Bombay, the traffic what used to be 4 or 5 years back, the way flyovers are coming, the bullet trains are coming in place, and they can save a lot of time for other things beside their professional work. So I believe that it is going to help a lot.
So we heard a number of interventions which were linked to that inflection point, right? Which is really when a woman has a child and decides to opt out. In fact, 45% of women have actually given that as the reason, as the primary reason for opting out, and hence the maternity bill, et cetera, et cetera. If you look back at the way the workplace is structured, it is primarily driven by just one overriding factor, a role definition. The man has historically been the primary breadwinner. The woman has primarily taken care of the home. The workplace has been structured accordingly, right? So there is a very clear divide between work and family. Now, in the newer workplaces, and it's already started to happen in the West, and everything that happens in the West comes here with a lag. There will be a lag, but it will. And it started to happen already, is the permeability or the fluidity between work and home. Creche is just one thing. But just like a man may still possibly in India be the primary breadwinner, but there are a lot of women who've started and moved into that role. You are seeing interfaces or intersections between a man and a woman's role. A man is no longer the breadwinner, right? Or he may still be the primary breadwinner in most instances, but no longer the breadwinner. A woman encourages and a man likes to play a role in his child's formative years and beyond, right? Can the workplace adapt to that? And that's a structural issue which till date has not been. We have moved on as individuals, but we live in a 1950s workplace where you come to work, you leave everything behind and you come to work, right? So you have a question? Yeah, just one second. So the whole idea is how can this workplace be structured which takes care of where we've already moved to? And that is one of the interesting things which we will need to look at. We'll hear the question first since there is a hand raised.
Since we are talking about reinventing the world of work, specifically, I'd like to direct this towards Mr. Dang. The agenda brief talks about parental leave and not about maternal leave. You were talking about a woman enjoying her pregnancy and her child. I honestly think that if a father and a man took parental leave or paternal leave more seriously, maybe his spouse or the woman could get back to work much, much faster. I think the onus has been put on the woman to enjoy, quote unquote, her maternal leave, while the father can go back to work because he doesn't consider it as important or as a priority because he thinks, oh, my wife is at home, she'll take care of the kids.
That's a brilliant question and I only second it and I'm going to ask Surinder to answer.
So, to answer your question again, I would say that you are right. Fathers are equally responsible and paternity leave should be there. It is there. It can be increased, decreased. It is a question which is debatable. So I don't want to get into it, but I will get into a situation. Now, mother breastfeeds her child, father can't do that. So, mother is required in the initial year of the life of a baby more than anybody else. So I can tell you, if you see even today malls, they have got a breastfeeding rooms. But I don't think there are too many corporates, those who have got breastfeeding rooms. Do they have? I'm sure. I do not know. How many of you can raise hand says that your office or your corporate office has got a breastfeeding room? Anybody in the room? Please, please. You have. Please, please, please.
It's only in India actually, and maybe in some Eastern countries where they talk about a mummy room. If you go to a country like Australia, it's called a parent's room, which means that a father can also change the diaper of the child and it's not the mother's sole responsibility. Also, with regard to a breastfeeding room, there are also breast pumps that have been created. Where I agree that in the initial stages, a woman is required for breastfeeding, but as after 3 months, a child can also have something called top feed.
To me, the reason why I personally am opposed to the maternity bill of 26 weeks is primarily because it has taken us right to the top where the Nordic states are, right? And there it is parental leave. It is also paternity leave on a use it or it lapses basis. And the reason for that is something I support primarily, which is that a father is required in the formative stages of a child's development. There is enough and more data which talks about it. The moment you do that, a lot of this cultural divide, which is very prevalent in countries, particularly like India and quite a few other countries as well, start to disappear. Since we're talking of that subject, and I'm passionate about this, I will mention that this was a superb opportunity to also create a new norm. Most people talk about changes taking years and years. Not a believer in that. You can use a social norm to bring quick changes. We're talking about this only in the organized formal sector. This is largely middle and upper middle class. If not the upper middle class, where can you induce change? If you had paternity leave, and it's still not been encouraged beyond 10 days anywhere in India, if you had a proper paternity leave, you had 3 or 4 high potential males in the organization, and I use the word high potentials, you start a new social norm. Why? Because the moment a few high potential people are induced to take that, and some of them are outliers who would love to take it, because we have a lot of such supportive men in India, the moment they take it, you start a norm. You have a whole lot of others who, out of herd mentality, and that's what behavioral economics says, and is supported again empirically, will jump into that bandwagon and be part of that. The others will feel shamed, and you start a new social norm. Maybe in a tiny mini India, in the formal sector where only 8% work, but it's worth its while. So to me, it was an opportunity lost, but be that as it were. But the point that I had started to make when you put your hand up was the fact that this primary segregation is what has resulted in a workplace being made by men and for men. And those of us who've been successful as women have felt very pleased that we've been able to somehow maneuver, and we tend to insufficiently account for luck. We've had supportive spouses, we've had supportive bosses, we've made our way up. For every one of us, there are 10 or 12 who could not make it, not due to their failing, but because luck didn't support them as much. It takes a certain degree of humility to admit it, but it's worth admitting it, because very often you will have this pointed out in the financial services sector where I come from. You have the largest public sector bank being headed by a woman, the largest private sector bank being headed by a woman, the largest foreign bank being headed by a woman. The question then is, see, there are women at the top. Where is their discrimination? The stereotypes and biases are intact because the next level is still largely populated by men. The numbers are still abysmal.
To answer the last part of your question is, again I'll say it's debatable. Paternity leave for how many days? It should be there. It can be for 1 month, it can be for a week, 10 days, 6 months, I don't know. I don't want to get into that. But fact remains, as a corporate, as a company, we have got a program known as MBA, which is a management of baby affairs, where we trained both the parents to how to take care of a child, from how to take care of a child, how to take care of a woman post-delivery, and we even trained their families also, from diaper tying to anything I can tell you. So that type of programs we are running in our organization.
So I just want to say that it's not that I'm not supportive of paternal leave. I just think that change comes gradually. And it's almost 70 plus years of independence, and we've now got a change in our Maternity Act, which is over 100 years old. Change is happening. There is legislation in this country which says women cannot work beyond 8 o'clock. The government is looking to change that. It's not that the government is saying, women be damned, we are not going to allow it. There are changes that are happening parallelly, and change has to come. Social change has to come in a gradual format. We all saw what demonetization did. As Indians, we have to recognize it. It's, as a debate, it's very easy to say, hey, men should have, contributed and we should have given paternal leave. But the social change will come. It is women like us who have children. My boys are so used to my not being at home. They will be good fathers. And by the time they actually become fathers, yes, the laws will change. So everything happens gradually, and I am 100% sure that we will have paternal leave sooner than later.
The topic of legislation, would you like to talk about, Ariane, even from your context, what legislation has done in your country, or Surinder, anything else on the legislation side which is worth talking about, because we started on that topic?
Look, in Brazil, we also have recently was extended both maternity leave and paternity leave as well. So the question about the role of the father comes across every single society, right? But just to finish here with an anecdote, my husband helps me a lot at home, right? Right now, he is at home with my son. And it's not that simple. He has been working for his entire life, and he's in a sabbatical and helped me out. And in Brazil, when my son was born, it was really interesting because he always helped me with my son, right? And taking care, as our son, right? Taking care of the diapers inclusively. And one fact was hilarious. We had a neighbor with a daughter with the same age as our son. And one day he comes to us and says, and we're very good friends, said to my husband, please, can you stop changing the diapers? And my husband said, well, why? No, you don't understand. You're creating me so much trouble because my wife now is asking me why I'm not changing the diapers. So I think in the end, it's a problem. Look, I come from Latin America. Brazil is very far away. It's the problems everywhere, but it takes, again, a lot of effort. I like the comment here about takes time, right? And I think also for men to be conscious of that, right? Of course, we don't expect you to breastfeed, but all the help that you can give is very welcome. So I think in the end it's an evolution. I'm optimistic. I think I've witnessed a lot of change. I start working very young, and I only see improvements. So I hope that to continue, and I think here is the same, right?
Ariane, while you're speaking, we spoke when we were chatting in the room about unconscious biases. We spoke about a few examples, but would you like to talk about what your organization has done in the area of unconscious biases?
I think in the end, again, we're a global organization, right? I mean, every office that you go worldwide, you're going to see people from all over the countries. But we're very aware of the risks that everybody faces with unconscious bias. And that's why, and again, regardless where you're from. So that's why it has been established, this training, which is an unconscious bias training, when you go through exercise, right, to really understand where does it come from, right? And we've been working on this, right? So I think, again, it's a number of initiatives. We promote externally to our clients to give equal opportunity for women. We work with them, right, from child care, right, for a more open environment, sometimes place for, creating environment for, safe environment for complaints against any type of harassment, any type of abusive behavior, right? We promote that a lot, but we also promote internally. So I think in the end, the whole walk the talk is really important, even from the CEO level, right? For instance, our CEO, IFC has a CEO award, has a gender award, that every year we recognize projects that have been addressing the gender inequality and promoting equal opportunities, right? So this needs to be advocated. So that's the most important.
The targets, I think that's an important. Targets?
Targets. I mean, you have to establish targets, right? I mean, if you really want to increase the number of women working, again, it's not quota, it's targets, right? And why it's not a quota? It's not a quota because you're not saying that you're not accepting men. It's just that you have to have in mind that that you don't lose it all, right? Because otherwise, if you're not even monitoring, you might get skewed to one or another end. And one thing is really important. It's about equal opportunities. And as I said, we always say that we encourage women to apply. Usually women, it's kind of behavior again. It's, don't be afraid to apply for jobs or for positions or to express a willingness to progress in your career, because in the end, if you don't do that, who's going to do for you? So even though the opportunities might be there.
So I asked that question because, in my own experience, two things are largely known very little. There are a handful of companies which address it, but there are very few companies which recognize the whole area of unconscious biases and what it does, and hence are completely unaware that there are targeted interventions which have been empirically proven, which are available at every stage, from recruitment to appraisal to promotions and so on. So that's one. So she spoke about it and the fact that there is unconscious training happening. I am aware. There are a few companies in India it happens, but it's an absolutely minuscule number. And the second thing is really, when we move from gender neutral to affirmative action, one of the first things about affirmative action is primarily about saying that if this is the number today, we must have this number by this year. And not just in terms of the number of women joining, but at different stages, and how do you do that?
Yeah,
right?
this is important on the retaining of talents, right? That to increase the awareness, right?
Absolutely. So just wanted to know, Surinder, and from you, Archana, on either of the two areas, is there anything happening or your own perspectives? You spoke about legislation creating affirmative action, but anything from the organizational side before I guess we open it out, and I know there's a question there.
Right, from an organizational perspective, there is enough data to show that IT companies are some of the most women-friendly companies today. There is a lot of flexibility. There are good policies, whether it's flexible working hours, whether it is the ability to take care of your children, whether it's paternal leave. All of that is made available to our women employees. Apart from that, there are a lot of these employee resource groups that are created, and that I think is done across many companies. And that is more of an ability for like-minded people to come together. What I have seen and observed after meeting many of the young women across different sectors is that many of the young women don't realize what it is that they want. And Zia and Pinky and others spoke about it, that you should know what you want and then go after it. So these employee resource groups actually give you an opportunity to identify what is the area that you would like to focus your energies on. Maybe you're passionate about work, but then you also like to do community service. Or you want to encourage people who are differently abled to join the workforce. So there are different passions that people have, and ultimately it's possible you may just move out of your original career and move into the ones that the resource group is promoting. So these are some of the avenues that are given to employees to improve the diversity ratio, and it has, data shows that it has helped in improving that.
Hello, I'm Jyoti. I have a slightly contrarian question. I think right through the day we've been agonizing about this leaky pipeline and how do we get women back into the workforce. And a lot of our discussions have centered around the maternity leave and how do we kind of make it more consumer friendly or patient friendly. But have we, sometimes I myself ask this question that how many women really want to come back? Because, I have seen that there are a lot of women who, once they leave their jobs, they're pretty happy playing the role of a mother because they take that role very seriously. So I have two questions. One is homemaking really something to be ashamed of? And I'm just asking this as a question because many a times when you ask these women, contributing role in terms of contributing to society. And secondly, the other question is, can homemaking ever become a profession? Because a lot of these women have actually left their jobs. Maybe their husbands have moved jobs, so they've gone elsewhere. And after that, they're completely out of the rat race, so to speak. So how do we get them to take what they're doing more seriously, if at all?
So I want to say that homemaking is one of the most difficult tasks. I was working and then I had my children and I actually stopped working for 5-6 years. And that is the time I realized how much I loved working as a lawyer. Because it is a thankless job.
Yeah.
And today when I meet my friends who have given up working for the sake of their children, I actually pat them on the back. And I go and tell everybody that you should be proud of the fact that you're working at home because you're not compensated, you're not really acknowledged. And it is very easy for people like us who just pick up our bags and come to work and then just forget about what's going on at home. So it's not a thankless job, and again, it's a mindset. Women have to...
But it's seen as a thankless job.
Yes. So the more we communicate, again, it's the same thing that women need to ask for what they want. They need to appreciate what they are doing. They need to love themselves, essentially. you know, just being in the workforce and coming into discussions like this doesn't make us any better than the ones who are sticking to the home front. And what they can do to make a difference is educate their children. It's very important to tell the boys at home that there is no difference between you and your sibling who's a female child. And it's happening. I have teenage children, and I know that the girls who are their friends are not the way I was. They are very, very aware of, I mean, they actually have that couldn't care less attitude. And, you know, working at home and cooking and all of these things don't even come to them.
Yeah.
So the right upbringing to the next generation is something that should be focused on. And personally, whenever I meet anybody, I tell them that, you know, homemaking is the toughest, and they should just stick to what they're doing. There's nothing so very, you know, big about being in the workforce today.
Yet it's so important to be financially independent. So,
Very
you know,
true.
the question is, how do you balance out the two? How does a woman play, you know, take her role as a homemaker and mother seriously, and yet at the same time contribute financially so that she becomes independent? So I think that's one challenge which all women face.
I don't know, after the, you know, I'm saying it in the lighter sense that when this demonetization happened, the housewives had the maximum money at home.
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know about financial independence, but they do manage to save up. How they do it is, you know, pure science.
But, you know, they need self-respect. Their self-esteem is totally lacking, and that's where I don't know what is the role we can play.
So, you know, my own perspective on that is, as long as it's an informed decision that a woman is taking, and it's not something that is being forced upon her, because the work environment is hostile or thinks she can't come back, and it's an informed choice, and many women make that choice. As that's a choice that needs to be respected, right? And when you talk about, there are some organizations which are trying and attempting to do it, and I know of some entities, certainly within our country, who encourage a woman who wants to stay at home and sometimes work part-time for her own self-worth, to increase family earnings, and those are extremely great positives which need to be actually sort of looked up to and lauded. The third element, which you've been sort of probably, I don't know whether you're alluding to it or not, and which is probably something which is some time away in this country, is actually accounting for what is regarded as drudgery, or the whole unpaid, and what is the value of that contribution, right? And once that value is known, at least from a pure self-worth perspective, that makes a person realize what he or she is doing, especially others around her.
Yeah.
So it's important to educate the men. And, you know, as Debjani said, we need more men. They are the ones who are giving this sense of value or no value to the woman that they're with. And that has to change. And that is what I tell my children, and I tell the people that I know, that it's okay to be a homemaker. And so it's important for men to attend such conferences and appreciate what women actually do.
So this has been a lovely session. I actually wanted to ask you, we've looked at, in terms of an equitable future, we've looked at maternal leave, paternal leave, coming back to work. But what about individuals or women who are at work and they're facing POSH issues, prevention of sexual harassment? Would you have any thoughts about that? What are some of the challenges faced by them, and how do you bridge such issues?
So I want to say that I'm actually angrily passionate about it. I encourage every woman employee in the company to come and talk to the women leaders. It is a responsibility. There is massive amount of training that is done across various offices and sites, which is mandated by law, but it is something that should not be happening. It should not be happening, and the companies are serious. At least the ones that I've worked with are very serious. Nothing less than termination. We don't shame the individuals because, you know, we don't. It would be a good idea to shame them, but it is a great challenge to the workforce, and I see that a lot of women have hesitancy in coming back to the workforce on these issues. But what, again, I would like to say is that women should speak up.
But again, it has to be above the gender, you know. It holds true for both. Am I right, Doc? Am I right? Doesn't happen, but
So just, this is a tough question. I mean, it goes without saying that, unless the woman speaks up, and sometimes the circumstances constrain her to not speak up at that moment. Sometimes there's a delay. And, we've read some of these really high-profile cases where finally the woman has had to leave. And it took a long time for action to be taken, even in very sort of well-thought-of organizations which had the best of best in terms of boards with very high-profile women on them. So it's a tough one, but the point is, unless it is completely a zero-tolerance policy on the part of companies, and I would say, that you need to shame people here. And that's the only way that you can create not just an effective deterrent, but also make it safe and worth a woman's while to come up and speak when it happens, rather than dilly-dally, wait for a lot of time to elapse, and then see somebody else talk about it and then have the courage to bring it up, which is unfortunately the way it happens now.